Illumination made one good movie, Despicable Me 1. Speaking of which, that movie is 12 years old. 12? Yeah, 12 years since Illumination made a good movie. Yes, I did not stutter. They have one. This movie being from my childhood when I was a young little thing. Believe it or not, Despicable Me changed everything. It had a comically important butterfly effect in the industry, and that's starting with the casting. In case you don't know, celebrity casting is incredibly common today in animated movies. If you really want to be pedantic, it all started out with Aladdin back in 1992 with Robin Williams, and to be fair, Disney was the pioneer. And there were cases in the future where movies involved celebrity casting, like for example, Shrek. However, never ever have I seen a company so nonchalantly mention, oh yeah, we've 10 A-list actors in our animated movie. Until Illumination. Is 10 a stretch? We'll find out. Despicable Me's cast has, I'm not gonna read it out, I'll just show you. Yeah, the Despicable Me cast is stacked. I want to say though, the increasing use of celebrity talent for voice acting has harmed the voice acting industry. As in, it's an argument of who's got more clout, not who's better. Also, if the celebrity isn't a good voice actor, it's just their regular voice, and it's weird to hear them just be them. I.e. Miranda Cosgrove is Margot. It's just her talking.
People in the entire world that can tell Gru what to do.
Caramel clumpies and 15 boxes of coconutties.
We do know why they use celebrities to voice characters. It's free advertising. Plus, it entices parents, as parents will be like, oh my gosh, Steve Carell, wow, that's so fun. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the kids are enticed to watch it because of them. No, I'm kidding. The Minions weren't the main pull of the movie yet. Now, of course they were used in the advertising, but they weren't established as a characters. Heck, they talk in this movie, albeit briefly.
Stuffed crust.
The main focus at this point was the plot around Gru, which was really fun. Coincidentally, there were about 3 or 4 films during the early 2010s that were focused on villains, which I found to be really fun and unique looking back. And I liked that I grew up with them, as it showed me the world wasn't black and white. Plus, I've always been a fan of the bad guys, Gru being one of them. Gru is this ambiguous European villain who plays into the stereotype that if they're not American, they're a bad guy. His design is intimidating and imposing, as he is canonically 14 feet. What? And his character design is so unique and interesting. When have we gotten a protagonist to a movie who looks like that? I really love the introduction scene in this movie too. It establishes a goofy tone that there are these historical monuments that are getting stolen, and it's a giant deal because they are keystones of our culture. Or whatever. And then following that, we get a news broadcast of the presenter telling us about the tragedy, which then leads into Gru's introduction scene. Gru not really being a conventional evil character, he's just goofy and likes trolling. Yes, that's how I perceive it. And you like him because he is in all of us. Gru is inside of you. Yes, that small part of you that wants to see the world burn. That's Gru. And this movie appeals to that side of you, and contorts it and puts it on display. For lack of a better word, we watch him act like a douchebag with little reason. And that's even supported by Pharrell Williams, who sings the main song of the movie. No, turn it off! Despicable Me. Yes, that's what the song is called. The opening lyric being, I'm having a bad day. It's relatable. Sure, we get a low-key sad Dr. Doofenshmirtz backstory later on, but on the outset, Gru is just being a bad guy because he can. I suppose talking about Pharrell Williams can lead me into talking about another aspect of the movie, the background music. If I didn't spend a majority of my time obsessing over art and drawing, I would have spent my time obsessing over music. It's a well-known fact that the soundtracks of Illumination movies go way too hard. I mentioned it in the last video. But with Despicable Me being their first movie, it kind of feels quaint in that it isn't oversaturated with big singers. Sure, Pharrell sings 2 songs, but it's not that big of a deal. I noticed that while I was watching the movie, the soundtrack was really good. I love the use of the guitar and I love the Gru leitmotif. And whistling was a really unique inclusion. There is a reason why the music is still iconic, 12 years later. Okay, maybe that plays a part in it. I haven't really talked about the plot that much yet. I found the plot to be really fun. It's a redemption arc of a villain who was never really that bad of a guy. It treads the trope of the new younger character outdoing the older character, this entire dynamic being Vector and Gru respectively. Vector being the supposedly young, really competent villain. I'm not 100% sure what age he is, but there appears to be a large age gap because of how the two are described. Not to mention, Gru just looks really old. Although they're allegedly meant to be close in age according to the rise of Gru. Gru having to step up to the mantle of being a true bad guy. If you want to know how the girls got involved in the story, in case you've forgotten, these 3 girls try to sell Gru cookies. Gru then gets the idea to use these 3 girls to get into Vector's lair. The scene of Gru trying to sneak in being really fun and lighthearted. Although throughout the film, the 3 girls help Gru to become human and have emotions. I've told you briefly about the rivalry between Gru and Vector. This rivalry being the main crux of the movie, and Gru having to choose the life he wants to live. It's a balancing act that he can't do. Gru can't multitask, just like yours truly. You'd have the girls constantly intervening Gru's plot to steal the moon. I never mentioned that. Gru wants to steal the moon in this movie, which goes beyond the typical pyramid or Eiffel Tower. It's an objectively bad idea to steal the moon, and we are repeatedly reminded of that throughout the movie. But Gru is so dedicated to the cause he doesn't see the bigger picture, which is gruesome repercussions. Gru. It's evident in the film that Gru has got these lofty ambitions, but his brain is struggling in an argument with his heart. I've went through that exact same thing before. Spoiler alert, Gru ultimately sides with his heart. You know, it's like the opposite of Whiplash. I love how Gru's villainy is embodied by an older, more experienced character called Nefario. He is 110% focused on the goal of stealing the moon, and serves as a reminder of Gru's goals and ambitions, which again is kind of relatable. Which if you had a personification of your goals and ambitions, I can guarantee you would look like Nefario. Like, you can have friends who are supporting you to achieve your goals, and sometimes you ignore them because your heart tells you to. Although Nefario gets involved in the plot, he gives the kids back up for Gru, even though Gru gets the brunt of the decision. I really love how the audience is able to see themselves in Gru. I see myself in Gru, even if it's only minimal. The art style is also really interesting. It doesn't suffer the same fate Future Illumination does. The art style is very clean, sometimes exaggerated, and sure, some of the models do look a bit wonky, but I put that down to the movie being 12 years old, not the art direction. Also, some shots are very nicely composed, like, look here. Low-key, even if Future Illumination movies do fall off, there are parts of them that are framed very nicely. Future Illumination movies have got weird motion blur going on, which if you didn't notice it then, you would notice it now. Despicable Me doesn't have that, which makes it feel less Illumination. That entire thing being completely unrelated to the art style though. I suppose that part of the reason why I enjoy Despicable Me 1 so much is because it doesn't feel like an Illumination movie. This leading into the third act. The story of Despicable Me is unconventional, as in, the stealing of the moon isn't the climax. In fact, it's used to show how irrational and idiotic the entire idea was. Vector being the only one not in the know. And it's funny because this minor part of the plot turns out to have major significance. Earlier in the film, during the first confrontation between Vector and Gru, Gru's ship car thing gets shot with the shrink ray, which results in his ship thing shrinking. For a majority of the film, you'd be led to believe that the shrink ray is permanent, this making the plot to steal the moon quite straightforward, as Gru wouldn't have to worry about it randomly getting bigger again. However, that is not the case at all. We're given hints throughout the movie, but it turns out that in the third act, the larger the object is, the shorter time it'll stay small. And it's fun because earlier in the film, the shrink ray is used in an innocent and fun experiment where Gru shrinks a minion. And it makes sense there, because minions are small anyways. It makes sense that it wouldn't get large again for a while, but earlier from that scene of the minion getting bigger, Gru's ship becomes large again in a scene that's meant to be comic relief. Whenever I was watching the movie, I didn't connect the dots until the third act, which was definitely intentional. And having Nefario be the one to call out the Gru really shows the gap in experience between the two. The third act of the movie is a trip, and I love it so much. It wraps every plot point together so nicely, and it's completely unexpected, because throughout the film we're to believe that the moon is endgame when it really isn't. The best way I can describe it is that the story caught me off guard, and the third act of the movie was full of unknowns. Like, I legitimately didn't expect Vector to come back and kidnap the girls. I thought he died. The character of Vector was almost exclusively comic relief. He's only in the film for about 8 minutes. And before the climax, his last scene is him flying into a transmission tower and being electrocuted. Don't blame me for thinking he died. After Vector kidnaps the girls, we see Gru activate feral mode, and he displays skills he should not have, showing exceptional athletic ability. And I love that Gru gradually became more competent than Vector over the course of the movie, because you can tell in the third act that Vector only has an advantage because Gru got attached to the 3 girls. Apart from that, Gru has outclassed him in almost every way. There's a minor subplot about the Bank of Evil, who's got a banker called Mr. Perkins. Mr. Perkins really sent in Gru in his character arc, this being because he is doubtful of Gru's ability to steal the moon. And I find that the underlying theme of their dynamic is, my job is to do the impossible, and your job is to believe I can't. This doubt from Mr. Perkins being personified and him literally pulling funding from Gru, which then prompts Gru to be like, guys, we have no funding, you all have to get a new job. This scene of Gru being depressed brings him back down to earth and makes him reconsider his goals and how he's going to achieve them. It turns out that the bank pulling funding wasn't that big of a deal, but it was more so to show that Gru's team fully backs him and believes in him. Unlike Perkins, I found that entire part of the movie to be really intriguing, and it helped elevate the moon heist to being fun to watch. Again, it's relatable, doing things despite the world telling you no. I think that's what makes Despicable Me so good. Everyone can relate to it. Not because it was manufactured by a focus group to appeal to the largest common denominator. It's low-key timeless. The only part of the film that's aged is Vector playing the Wii. That's literally it. Oh no, there's another part of the movie that's aged. Remember how in almost every animated movie from the late 2000s to the early 2010s, there was a dance scene at the end? Yeah, That happens here too. I find it really funny because they almost always include the villain dancing too. Which, yup, there's Vector. Then the film ends off on a really pretty shot. Thank you for watching the video. If you vibe with my content, go watch my other videos if you can. Join the Patreon if you want to. It really helps make the videos happen. Anyway, thank you. Bye.